I want to tell you about a new podcast called Amuse News. Publishing multiple days a week, Amuse News is your source for food news, interviews from around the food world, and more. On the show, we'll be engaging with food storytellers, from chefs to advocates to people working in the field, and many more. Find Amuse News wherever you get your podcasts. Amuse News is a destination for everyone who's looking for a new, insightful look into the world of food.
During this time, it's more important than ever to support our friends and neighbors in the restaurant industry. Restaurant Workers Community Foundation has set up a national COVID-19 crisis relief fund. The money they raise will provide direct relief to individual restaurant workers, support other nonprofits serving restaurant workers in crisis, and offer zero-interest loans for restaurants to get back up and running. Visit restaurantworkerscf.org to donate today. And if you need a little extra motivation, you can DM your $20 donation to RWCF's co-founder, John DeBerry, on Twitter, and he'll give you directions for making a signature quarantine cocktail. Donate now at restaurantworkerscf.org.
Hi, I'm Eli Sussman, and welcome to The Line. On today's episode, an interview with Dan Meiser and James Wayman. Together, they run 85th Day Food Community in Mystic, Connecticut, which encompasses Oyster Club, Grass and Bone, and Engine Room, making up a restaurant group that had over 100 employees before COVID forced them to alter or close down their businesses. On this episode, we talked extensively about the crucial changes they've made to their businesses in order to have them survive the crisis. Dan is also chairman of the Connecticut Restaurant Association and speaks to some of the larger issues facing the state and the industry overall. Like many operators, they are looking forward to rehiring their staff and reopening, but are cautious as to when and what that may look like. Throughout this process, they've kept a positive outlook, have remained committed to their farm partners and local vendors, and are resolute in continuing to serve their community as they push forward. Here's the interview. So, Dan, I want to ask you first about the various restaurants. So Oyster Club, Grass and Bone, and Engine Room. If you can just briefly describe each one of the restaurants and what each one of them does. And then after that, I want to know about which one of them are open. I see that you've got takeout going from some of your spots. So if you can talk a little bit about which places are still functioning in any capacity, and how did you guys make the decision to keep any aspects of them up and running?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the three restaurants. So we opened Oyster Club was the first restaurant. Opened that. We're into our ninth year right now, and Oyster Club is the flagship restaurant of ours. James and I made a decision day one of opening Oyster Club that we were really going to walk the walk in terms of sourcing locally, daily menu changes, obviously working within the seasons and within the product that's available to us here in Southern New England. Engine Room came about 5 years ago, and Engine Room, we always sort of describe it as Oyster Club's rowdy younger brother. It's a bigger space. It's in an old industrial building. Really beautiful food, beautiful cocktail menu, great draft beer selection. It's a vibrant scene. But there's no question that Engine Room and the offerings there appeal to a wider group of folks in our community. And then Grass and Bone is the newest member of the family. We're into our third year now, and Grass and Bone is our locally sourced whole animal butcher shop and restaurant. So, we source meat from all over the region and break it down there. We smoke. We make charcuterie. We have a pretty extensive dry aging program. And then the real, I think, kind of the crown jewel of Grass and Bone is the little counter service restaurant that we have in there. Very simple, very approachable, very fast, very affordable food, but really working off of what's in the butcher case and what's being delivered to us by our local farmers. In terms of this recent COVID crisis, we started seeing a real decline in business the second week of March as the disease entered the United States and started working its way east. We made the decision on Sunday, March 15th, to dramatically change our operations, and also made the hardest decision, I know, either personally or professionally, and I think I speak for James. I know I speak for James in this. The hardest decision we've ever made, which was to lay off our hourly folks, collectively between the three restaurants that represented over 100 people. And so Monday morning, March 16th, we worked at length with every single member of our team to get them through that process, to work with them on filing their unemployment, and ensuring that they had the necessary resources to get through this. Later that afternoon, Governor Lamont issued an executive order which closed all the dining rooms in Connecticut and limited restaurants to takeout and to go only. That's been our reality now since Monday, March 16th. And for the foreseeable future, at least over the next month. Of the three restaurants, a decision was made to close Oyster Club entirely. We felt strongly that the model over there and the menu, and just its reputation as a sit down restaurant, that it didn't really lend itself towards any sort of to-go model. And we also had to consolidate resources, so we did keep every single member of our management team on board. Everybody took a substantial pay cut. James and I made a commitment to not take a paycheck during this crisis until we get back up to some sense of normalcy. And so what we did is take our very talented staff, our management staff at Oyster Club, and we shifted them over to Grass and Bone. So they linked up with our team at Grass and Bone to make up the full crew working at Grass and Bone. So Grass and Bone and Engine Room currently are open for to go and curbside pickup. The frightening reality of restaurants across this country, and certainly in Connecticut, and ours are no different, is that we've seen at a place like Engine Room, which was the largest and highest revenue generating restaurant that we have in our group, we've seen a drop in revenue about 90%. Over the same period from last year. So Engine Room is still open, but obviously at a very limited capacity. Grass and Bone is open and thriving, surviving, I guess you would call, in this environment because of its ability to have food that is travels well and has a reputation for to go, but primarily because of the market component of it.
James, I want to ask you about things from the culinary side. First, if you can speak to just how it felt when you had to start telling, your staff that they wouldn't have jobs in the near future, and then also about the pivot to changing menus and figuring out maybe which purveyors are still functioning and up and running. Just how did you reorganize yourself from the culinary side to start selling food in different ways, and maybe in ways that you had never really thought you'd be doing 8-10 weeks ago?
Absolutely. So, like Dan said, as far as laying off our staff, definitely the hardest business decision we've ever made. Heartbreaking in a lot of ways, but from a brighter note, felt wonderful that we were able to get all of our people situated, signed up for unemployment, and feeling good about where they ended up. We've also been, as you've probably seen, a lot of people in restaurants doing. We've had a very successful GoFundMe. We have also done really well with gift card sales. We've been giving 50% of our gift card sales to staff, as well as people have been incredibly generous as far as their tipping. We've also allowed people to order at the restaurants and at the butcher shop at a much reduced rate at cost, so they can feed their families, which also feels like the right thing to do, and supporting them. And then also just taking constant initiative to stay in touch. Everybody in our management team was given the kind of directive to pick a few of the people on our hourly staff and continue talking to them daily, weekly, and just kind of monitoring their state of being, making sure their employment benefits went through, and everybody's in good shape, which is really nice. And we've actually, since laying off all of our hourly staff, we've started to be able to bring some people back, which is wonderful. And I think that's in a large part through some of the pivots that we've been doing. So to me, the kind of, from a food standpoint, the most glaring thing that's kind of like just kicks you in the face every day, whether it's a good way or a bad way, is that you're cooking for a different reason now. I would say it almost takes the ego out of it in a way. We don't generally cook from that perspective anyway, but this is more about cooking for survival, for feeding people from the gut, for providing comfort, as opposed to trying to create some fancy new dish. So I think it, really just gets down to that kind of basic nurturing idea of what food really is. And I would imagine that when we see our way through this, that chefs are going to be cooking from a different perspective maybe than they did when they got into it. One of the things I think people have talked about a lot is, not just the suffering of restaurants, but looking at the suffering of the entire chain. The farmer, the fisherman, the oysterman, the cheesemaker, the small guy brewing beer. There's casualties along every lines. And we've made a real concerted effort to, as we create menus, to continue contacting these people, to stay in touch, and to actually, in some cases, especially through Grass and Bone, move more product than we even were before. And it's just nice to see these huge size released from farmers as we're able to buy more of their product and to keep them in business as well. And that's always the goal. Those connections are supremely important to us.
Yeah, when you talk about sort of the entire breakdown of the system, the entire pipeline, people haven't really understood this up until now, and the closing of the restaurants has a ripple effect that goes out into the community, and all of your places seem to be really heavily integrated and utilizing local farms. And so I want you both to speak on that a little bit more. What has the immediate impact been in your surrounding areas when all these restaurants go down? And farmers and dairy producers, they don't have anywhere to sell anymore. It's wonderful that you guys are still being able to utilize them, but maybe, Dan, you're having those conversations at maybe a top line level with other restaurateurs right now. But what is going on the ground with farms and producers nearby?
Sure. Well, coincidentally, I just got off the phone about 20 minutes ago with Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who's one of our members of Congress here in Connecticut. And one of the main topics of discussion on that call was the fact that Connecticut farmers, as we speak right now, Connecticut dairy farmers are dumping milk in their fields. There's crops that are literally being plowed under or rotting in storage right now because the wholesale and institutional pipelines that these farmers depend upon are gone. So to answer your question, what is the immediate effect been? It's been devastating. But there is hope. There's a lot of amazing people in the restaurant world and on the policy side that say, hey, look, we got a big problem here. We've got farmers and producers that have an excess of food. And meanwhile, in the same state, we have food banks that are literally turning people away because they're running out of food. So there is a real problem, but there's also a real solution that just requires some people sitting in a room and figuring out how to make this happen. So many of our farmers, certainly have some sort of a retail component to them, whether it's a little farm stand or whatnot. But the bulk of them require and depend upon these larger wholesale accounts, and those are dried up. So for us, the fact that we're able to still support on a small scale is important. We made a commitment from day one of this crisis where, we said, hey, look, we're going into the bunker here. We know that cash is tight, and every restaurant and every small business across this country is going into this mode of preservation during this time. How do you hang on to cash? And unfortunately, there's a lot of folks out there whose bills aren't getting paid. And one of the commitments that we made from day one is that any commitment that we have or outstanding invoice we have or connection that we have to anyone in our local community and local foods, those bills are getting paid, and that's on us to figure out how to do that, because there is such an extraordinary web of goodness and of economic stimulus that comes out of restaurants. It's the farmer and the fisherman, but it's also the lady that does your flowers. It's the local linen company. It's the local gas company. It's all of these small businesses that require so heavily on the support of restaurants, not just in our community, but in communities across this country.
So talking about support and the government and what is exactly being done at those high levels, I want to ask about the PPP first from a personal perspective for your businesses. So if you were able to successfully get a government loan through the stimulus package, if you can speak to what that process was like, and then also if you can talk about what's going on in Connecticut with restaurants being able to secure it, and if you can comment a little bit on some of the backlash that there were large restaurant chains and some hotel groups that were able to secure very large $10 and $20 million loans via the PPP, which has made it so that small operators were not able to access any of that money. So if you could speak to that personally and then at a larger level.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the good news is, and when I got off the phone with Congresswoman Delores, she was on her way down to D.C. to vote on this latest version, this fourth iteration of the CARES Act. I think they're calling it COVID-4, and in this new bill, there's an additional $310 billion that is going to re-up the PPP program, which is great. But to your point, we'll see how that goes. If the process is anything like the first go around, there's still going to be a lot of mom and pops out there that get the short end of the stick. The PPP, when it first came out of the Senate, and then even the iteration that was passed by the House and signed by the president, there was an understanding within the small business community and certainly in the restaurant community that this was a good thing, that it would allow a restaurant or any business to utilize this aid, via the federal government to offset the single largest line item that we have on a restaurant balance sheet, which is our labor. Unfortunately, the night before applications were accepted, which was Friday, April 3rd, that night before, the U.S. Treasury Department gave guidance on the PPP, and one of the guidance points that they made was this idea of a 10-day period that you had from date of approval to originate your loan. And without getting too much into the weeds here, basically what that means is everybody who was hoping to get money hopefully got their application in on that opening day, because it truly was a race, right? It was how quickly could your bank get your application submitted to the federal government and get it approved. And we knew that there was $349 billion in the fund, which seems like an extraordinary amount of money, but everybody knew that it wasn't going to last forever. So people like ourselves who did get our applications in on that opening day were hopeful that if we were lucky enough to get approved, that once we got approved, that we could sit on that loan and begin to use that loan at a later date, because our reality, and I'll use Oyster Club as an example, we're closed. So Oyster Club got approved for a PPP loan, and Oyster Club, last week, our loan originated, meaning our loan started because it had to within that 10-day period. So the problem becomes, well, what the hell are we going to do with this money if we're not open for business and we don't have employees to pay? And so that's really, the devil in the details, where the PPP program, unless you're a business that is fully operational right now, does not do much of anything in the way of good. And that's unfortunate, because if the program was at all like it was originally designed to be, any restaurant could take that money once they got approved and start their loan at a date when they became fully operational, so it actually benefited the restaurant and the employees that they could then bring back and hire and pay, and have that pay forgiven by the federal government, therefore giving that small business a real economic shot in the arm. So unfortunately, that did not happen. So there are, most restaurants across the country didn't even get approved because the funds ran out. Those that did get approved, don't really have a whole lot of use for this money in terms of hoping to have it forgiven, because there's quite simply aren't people to pay. So our hope from a advocacy side is that this next round, because believe it or not, even though they're voting today, there will be an additional round of funding after this, a fifth. Our hope is that within that fifth CARES package, that the details of loan origination date and or a separate restaurant and hospitality fund will come out of the federal government. Because, let's be honest, this crisis has been devastating on every community and every person within every community across this country. But when you talk about industries, there is no single industry in the United States that was hit harder than restaurants. It's not even close. When you look at number of job losses, when you look at lost revenue, the restaurant industry was, simply put, it was gutted. And the folks in Washington do recognize that. What they have failed to realize to date, or at least act upon, is that it does need special attention. It does need these dates to be modified and amended, or to have a separate restaurant hospitality fund.
We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us.
Restaurants employ over 15 million people nationwide, and 2/3 of all restaurants are independently owned and not part of big chains. Yet currently, these small businesses are not represented in government relief negotiations. ROAR is working to change that by fighting for relief opportunities for all restaurants. ROAR is advocating for an 8-point plan in New York State that will allow restaurants to reopen and rehire when the time comes. Dozens of industry leaders have signed on to the plan, like Namwa Tea Parlor, Field Trip, Momofuku, and many more of your favorites. You can join them at change.org by searching for ROAR, Relief Opportunities for All Restaurants.
Welcome back to The Line here on Heritage Radio. I'm your host, Eli Sussman. We pick up the interview with James Wayman and Dan Meiser, owners and operators of multiple businesses in Mystic, Connecticut.
It's impossible to predict the future, but even once restaurants do reopen, and you're talking about a quote unquote return to normalcy where people may be leaving their houses, we may be looking at restrictions, 50% allowed in a dining room, or, perhaps there will be temperature testing outside of restaurants. So I'm curious if you both have had any real concrete discussions about steps you may be taking at any of your restaurants upon reopening, trying to maybe get ahead of it and figure out what things may be like and how you can prepare for those situations when you throw the doors open again.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think it's important for folks to realize in every state across the country is that, those decisions are not going to be up to the small business owners and the restaurant owners. Those decisions are going to be made for them by the individual state that they're in. Here in Connecticut, I have actually am sitting on the governor's Reopen Connecticut advisory group, which is the group that's making those very recommendations. Ultimately, the governor and his team are going to make the final decisions. But we've got a group of about 12 folks from the business community in Connecticut, representing all industries, trying to figure out what this rollout and ramp up is going to be and how it's going to look. I do think it's safe to say that we certainly this phase one of reopening right now, Connecticut's targeted for May 20th. It may come a few days before that, hopefully not much after that. But I do think it's safe to say that we're going to see exactly what you described, which is, diminished dining room capacities, a real focus on sanitation and sanitizing protocol. I think it's safe to assume that social distancing measures within tables are going to be a requirement. And also, just the PPE of masks and gloves, at least in those early days, for our staff is most likely going to continue because it's currently in place now. So, part of the challenge for any restaurant is, running a business is hard enough, and when you do have these new set of mandates and rules and regulations that have to be adhered to, while I fully support the need and the absolute need to do this as safely as possible, it does put a burden and a strain on restaurants and businesses, especially the smaller ones who may have to go out and source this PPE, who are going to go out and have to figure out to the logistics of having somebody working the door to make sure that cover counts are where they're supposed to be and people are staying apart from each other and all this. It's going to be a struggle for sure. I'm hopeful that it's not going to be a forever thing, but especially in those early days, it's going to take restaurants and the folks in the general public to be comfortable with this new protocol.
Curious about how the pressure and strain of the changes in this situation may have led to anything positive. Maybe it's something that you've learned about yourself as a business leader, or just personally, maybe you've had a different amount of time or time in a different way to focus on another aspect of yourself personally or professionally. Any positive takeaways from the COVID crisis?
Unlike some, I think we're lucky to be working harder than ever. I think it's with Grass and Bone specifically. It's taken a business that was honestly always rather tough into a space of a little bit of thriving in a way. It's kind of found itself in a way, especially with this online market. I feel like a lot of one of the big bright spots is the support of our community. The people walking in day after day saying, thank you so much for being here and providing this for us. Because unlike a grocery store, you really don't have to come in, especially with the online store. We can put everything together for our customers. So it feels, I think, very safe for people. I think people like to know that they're supporting their community. And I also, one of the things early on for me personally, I started a project that was kind of based in the idea that I think everyone in this moment is going to have the sense to kind of self-protect right away, and kind of maybe go inward and make sure your family's okay. Whether that's your work family or your personal family, make sure you're okay, dealing with fear and anxiety. But kind of my takeaway from that first moment of that was that it kind of needed to look outward, and look at a way that we can kind of help in the world. So I've started this project. It's called Comfort, where I've reached out to a number of chefs to kind of contribute to what started out as what I thought would be a physical book, and now it's kind of turning into more of an online project with lots of contributors throughout the industry. It's still in process and progress, but the idea is to bring our restaurant industry together around this crisis, and actually not rely on the government, but rely on each other, our creativity, and the comfort that we can provide through recipes, through talk, through writing, through music, and kind of put it all in one place, so the public can have access to it. So, like I said, that's a work in progress, but hopefully it's something that's going to bring some brightness to more people in our industry, and it certainly has for me.
Dan, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think without question, you just to survive a period as monumental and staggering as this. I mean, this is truly the 500-year flood. You've got to look for those silver linings. You've got to look for the good in all of that. And we've seen extraordinary acts of kindness and generosity. Our restaurant group is called the 85th Day Food Community. We believe entirely in community, and that community extends beyond just our team, but it's the folks who live in town. It's the farmers and fishermen we work with. It's the artisans we work with. It's the guests that come in. And I would say, to really highlight on James's point, I've never seen our community stronger than in this moment right now. It really has been a beautiful thing in that regards. If you're able to, step away from the sadness and tragedy and the fear that has really kind of taken over so many in this country. And if you can get past that, at least for a moment, I think what you're going to find out there is a lot of good and a lot of selfless acts, and we're seeing that. One of the things that James talked about was, I've never worked so hard in my life, and he said that earlier, and it's true, and part of what drives that engine to work harder and faster and smarter and more efficiently with more purpose than we ever have, is the idea that someday soon we're going to be able to welcome all of our team members back, and when that day comes, that's going to be a huge milestone for us, and there'll certainly be a long road ahead in terms of recovery and getting back to anything that resembles what we may have considered to be normal. But I know that's going to be an important milestone for us. And part of why that's such an important thing is, those folks on our team who are part of our community, they're also a part of our family, and the strength and grace that they've handled this crisis with is truly inspiring. And I know it's something I think about before I go to bed at night, and I think about it when I get out of bed in the morning and say, all right, time to strap your boots on and go figure this out. Is a desire to hang on and to thrive, so those folks have something to come back to.
A lot of folks that are going to be listening to this interview, that are listening to this interview right now, are new owners or people that have not been in the industry as long as you guys, and you have several places open and have had great success. So if you could maybe just briefly give a little bit of wisdom to some folks that are so worried right now about maybe whether or not they'll be able to get back open, what would each of you tell someone who would say, I'm feeling lost right now, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to come back from this?
This is a moment for looking for support outwards, for sure, from the government. But I would also say, don't collapse. Find this moment as a moment of self-reliance to kind of, gather your community around you that, supports you, and not to just look inward, look outward and see how you can help the people around you. And I think that support will come back to you tenfold. I think, looking at what others are doing in the industry is very important right now, especially people that are being successful, seeing what's working, seeing what's not, and really knowing that the restaurant industry is a real community and that there's a lot of support for people out there that are struggling. So don't feel that like you're alone. Don't feel like that there's no hope, because there's always hope. Human beings are incredibly industrious, and I believe that people in the restaurant industry are some of the most industrious out there and some of the most hardworking out there. So if you can bring a generosity of spirit to what you do every day, I believe that you can succeed.
Yeah, I think going back to what I talked about before, this idea of community it plays right into what James just spoke about. The one thing that we all have in common, whether you're a restaurant in West Virginia or in San Francisco or in Mystic, Connecticut, there's other restaurants in your town, and there's other restaurant workers in your town, and there's farmers and fishermen nearby, and there's people who care about supporting local and supporting small business. So there's no getting around the fact that this is as bad as it gets. So I guess take solace in knowing that coming through this process and getting to the light at the end of the tunnel, which is there. We're close, every state out there in the coming weeks and months is working hard to get to a point where people can start to reopen their restaurants and get back to cooking and get back to serving their community. So, hang on. And if you can get through this, God, man, you can get through anything. And then we're all going to be better and stronger and tougher for it. And I also think from a business standpoint, though, take this opportunity to really examine your business model, how you run your restaurant. These last month and a half, I've learned more about our systems and our people and how we do business, and have discovered and learned more about our industry than quite possibly I have in years. And allow yourself to be open to change, and allow yourself to recognize new opportunities that are going to come out of this. Where we will see a different world, a different restaurant world, a different landscape coming out of this, even when we do get back to whatever the new normal is. And that's okay. Be aware enough to recognize it and adapt your business. Don't be afraid to pivot, be quick on your feet. And like James said, I mean, restaurant people are the toughest and smartest people and most industrious I've ever been around. So I do believe strongly that we will get through this as an industry, but you got to hang in there.
The Line is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners just like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.
As the news of coronavirus reverberates throughout the world, we at HRN are especially concerned about how coronavirus will impact our food system. We will use our platform to support the restaurant, agriculture, hospitality, and other food-related industries by maintaining our coverage and operations. As social distancing becomes the temporary norm, podcasts are more important than ever. There's never been a more crucial time to stay informed about the state of our food system and the way that food connects our global community. We're sharing all of our COVID-19 coverage at heritageradionetwork.org/COVID-19. From interviews with nonprofit leaders and journalists, to firsthand accounts from chefs and restaurant owners, to reports on how the crisis is affecting regional farms. Our team is working remotely from all over to keep food radio alive. HRN needs your support more than ever to keep sharing essential stories and resources with our listeners. Make a donation of any amount. Visit heritageradionetwork.org/
Hey, are you hungry? Well, you're in luck. Meat and 3 is back for season 16. I'm Taylor Early, and we've got a whole new batch of reporters I am so excited to introduce you to.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Fisher.
Asha McElroy.
Sam Girardi.
Jessica Gingrich.
Hannah from Wisconsin.
I'm a swing dancing audio engineer.
I am a future registered dietitian nutritionist.
I'm from New York, and I love rice and beans.
My favorite food of all time is a shrimp burrito.
I love watermelon.
We've also got a bonus podcast for you called Behind the Internship. 3 of our reporters will take you along to show how they developed stories for this very show, Meat and 3.
Hi, I'm Danielle Flitter, a plant-based chef from Philadelphia, living in Mexico City.
I'm Sophia Hooper. I'm a bartender based in Portland, Maine.
My name is Addison Austin Liu. I am a chef and food journalist from Salt Lake City, Utah, and my favorite food is Peruvian.
Rice and beans.
Hand-drawn noodle soup.
So tune in to enjoy a square meal for your ears. And I hope you saved a little room for dessert.